Hey gang, we are in Greencastle, Indiana this morning, early morning. We're about 40 or 50 miles southwest of Indianapolis, which is that away. We're at Forest Hill Cemetery, very historic cemetery. And we're gonna take a walk and talk about the diabolical murder of a young woman. We're gonna go back to 1896 here in Greencastle. This is the story of the evil dentists, diabolical dentists from Cincinnati. So let's take a walk. Let's look at some of these. There's some interesting stuff to see here on the way to the grave, and I'll tell you the story of Pearl Bryan. Let's go. She grew up here, and she had 12 brothers and sisters. Father's name Alexander. Susan Jane was mom. 12 children. Pearl was the youngest. Now the family was doing pretty well here. They were farmers. They were actually quite wealthy. They lived in a beautiful home here. And Pearl, you know, being the youngest, she was coddled maybe a little bit more than the others, and she had a very upbeat personality. Everyone loved her. She was happy, went to school. She was beautiful. She had many suitors, many men that wanted to court her. She was very picky. She was 23 years old. She had recently started a new job as a Sunday school teacher, but she needed apparently to take a little vacation. It was Tuesday, January 28th, 1896, and she said, "Mom and Dad, I've got to go over here to Indianapolis, and I'm just going to go see one of our friends." She didn't say who, but she was really going to Cincinnati to see a lover. And she never came back. No. Now look at this. Start right off here. We have what appears to be a Civil War. Yeah. A lot of Civil War, but what makes this particularly interesting, and the war graves are always interesting, but here, look at this. And this is a pretty massive monument. Now he's sitting on what appears to be a load. Is that a cannon load? You know what you guys tell me. He's sitting on logs. And what is his foot resting on there, guys? I'm really curious. I think it has to do with a cannon, but maybe not. Let me zoom in on this. What do you guys think? A lot of big stones here. Let's go this way. Let's cross the road here. It looks like there's some really intriguing things over here. So just 4 days later, on Saturday, February 1st, in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, it's about 5 miles to the southeast of Cincinnati over the Ohio River there was a farmer, and he was walking along his land. And he noticed something odd in the brush. It might have been his dog that noticed this. And he went over and he saw something in the bushes. He spread the branches, and he was mortified to see a woman's decomposing body. when he looked closer, and there was blood all over, he noticed that her head was missing. Her head was gone, yeah. Well, he called the police. They came, and they were able to determine that it was Pearl pretty quickly because of these custom shoes that she had. They were from here in Greencastle. Sadly, they also discovered that she was 5 months pregnant. Yeah. So they started to try to piece things together and figure it out, and they quickly determined that there was a boyfriend. His name was Scott Jackson. He had lived here in Greencastle with his mother. He was actually buddies with one of Pearl's cousins. That's who introduced them. Scott and his mother had come from Jersey City. Father was a famous Civil War soldier who had died, and they were very well-to-do, very wealthy. And Scott was, rich family, spoiled brat. And he grew up to be a man of bad character. Things caught up to him very quickly. Back in Jersey City, he was nabbed in a huge embezzling scheme. He only got away with it because he snitched on the partner, and he was granted immunity. So they came here, mom and son. Nobody knew him, and here he was respected as an upstanding man. So soon after Pearl's cousin introduced the two of them, they started a relationship, and Pearl became very fond of him. But Scott finally had to leave. He had to go to college. He was going to the Ohio College of Dental Surgery, but they kept their little long-distance relationship going. Now, I have to say here at this point that Scott, he wasn't really, Pearl was falling in love with him hard, but Scott wasn't interested in that stuff. This guy was a playboy, and he was a player, and he was playing Pearl. Kind of could keep her at a safe distance, but when he wanted to, he could have her when it was convenient. And what happened was, all of a sudden his news was shattered one day when Pearl's cousin said, "Hey, Scott, Pearl's pregnant. She's with child. Are you going to do the right thing?" And Scott's, of course, "Oh, yes, yes." So the first thing he did, and this is writing letters, writing letters, gets a letter to Pearl. "Don't tell anybody. Keep it a secret. We need to," and he was up front, he was like, "We need to terminate the pregnancy if we can. And why don't you come here to Cincinnati so we can be together? We're going to get married. But it's too early to have a baby. And there's some medications you can take that will, terminate the pregnancy." So that's what Pearl was doing, not going to Indianapolis. That's what she was doing in Cincinnati. So the next thing you know, she gets there and she disappears. What had happened was and I say they because Scott enlisted the help of his buddy and classmate, Alonzo Walling was his name, and they plotted a plan. And together they took her to a saloon that they knew there in Cincinnati, and they slipped cocaine into her drink. Got her drunk and drugged up, and at night, late at night, she's feeling worse and worse. In fact, a witness saw her on the wagon with these men, and she was in bad shape. Well, they took her out of Cincinnati there, and they murdered her, chopping her head off. And the reason they would do that is they were hoping it would be tough for law enforcement to figure out who the person was. Makes it all difficult to identify the victim, and then you can't identify the perpetrator, put the case together. Well, they put the case together, and Scott quickly became the prime suspect. And like before, the weasel, he gets under the lights of the investigation in the hot seat, and what does he do? He starts squealing, and he blames it on his friend Alonzo. They bring Alonzo in, and he does the same thing, so they're squealing on each other, so they both get charged with murder. Idiots. Town's in shock back here. There's a trial. Scott's tried first. They get more details. He won't say where Pearl's head is. The big thing is, where's Pearl's head? And they come up with all these crazy stories. Dayton, Ohio, and Ohio River, or it's on the sandbar, it's here, it's there. It's everywhere. Well, Scott is tried, guilty, sentenced to hang. Alonzo tried, guilty, sentenced to hang. We're going to hang them together. And that's what happened. These two men stood on the scaffold together. It was about a year later, on March 20th, 1897, they were both hanged side by side. And according to the witnesses, both men survived the initial drop, the drop that was supposed to break their necks, and instead they were strangled to death some minutes after. Maybe on purpose, right? We know the story, told the story. You've got to drop from a certain distance if you want to snap the neck, 5 or 6 feet, depending on the weight and the length of the rope. It's scientific. But if you want them to strangle to death, you make the rope maybe a little longer. Don't break their necks. You make the rope, no, I should say shorter, so they don't drop as fall, right? You make it longer, like Blackjack Ketchum, you fall so hard it'll pull your head off. So it was an art back in the day, but creepily, is that a word? Creepily. We did the story in Rawlins about Big-Nosed George Parrott. Remember that? The guy that was lynched and strangled, and we saw his death mask, his head, and the ears were gone. Why are the ears gone? Because when you strangle, nobody talks about this. Back in the day, when they lynched him and strangled him, the rope, that rope would, as you're wiggling, it would tear your ears off, the flesh. But anyway, yeah, there they strangled to death. And they deserved it, right? So here we are at the area where, big family, the Bryan family, and there's a lot of stones for them. And Pearl is buried here also. So here's Francis Clark, 1856, 1930, James, 1852, 1933. And I'm guessing those are some of the brothers, a couple of the brothers. Here is Mom and Dad. the marker for them. Alexander S. Bryan, born near Mount Sterling, Kentucky, September 18th, 1824. He died June 27th, 1901. So not long after all this happened, maybe 5 years or so. And then Susan Jane Farrow, his wife, 1833. So she was younger than Alexander. It's often the case, and she passed away in 1913. And Pearl's grave is over here. And I did come over to check it out, and I think her tombstone is gone. This is, I think, other family. I don't know if we can read that. A lot of that is worn away. Marion. This one is pretty legible. Flora. Love that name. Wife of C.J. Mitchell. She passed away in 1881, aged 22 years, 120 days. Jenny Bryan, daughter of Alexander, so again, another sister here. This is a common type of stone we've seen before. And she was born in 1870 and passed in 1895. So 25 years old only. Well, this is Pearl's grave, I believe. You can see some people left some things. Pennies and coins, and looks like a clamshell. Leave a rose. Yeah, what a story. So they never found Pearl's head. Never found it. There were skulls that had been found here and there in those parts near Cincinnati and all over, but they were all proven to be someone else. Most believe that Scott Jackson brought the head back and he burned it up in the dental college's furnace. But I guess we'll never know. If you go to Kentucky, just southwest on the outskirts of Cincinnati, across the Ohio River there, just south of the airport, the Cincinnati Northern Kentucky International Airport, little town of Union south of there, there's a place called Bobby Mackey's Music World. It's a little dive bar. But it is said that in the basement there, they have made communication with Pearl, her ghost, her energies. They call that place the gates to hell. And it's a very haunting place. You can go there today, and maybe you can talk to Pearl. Well, there it is. Rest in peace, Pearl Bryan.